Prophet mutually, to call one another, to encourage one another to hold firm to Allah's book and to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and to invite to all good and to call to all guidance. All of that seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's closeness, His nearness, and His reward subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, so last time we talked about the conditions, or you could even say preconditions of prayer. And we wanted to do a little bit of review. Who can tell me who can mention some of the preconditions? Who can mention some of the preconditions of prayer? Even one. Yes.
Okay. So the first precondition is just knowing that it's time to pray.
Knowing that the prayer came in. Okay, great.
Second one is facing the Qibla.
Facing the Qibla.
With your chest.
With your chest. Ahsant.
Third one is your space, yourself, and your clothes being free of impurities.
Yes. Excellent.
The fourth is
can anyone help him? What's the fourth?
Yeah.
No.
Covering
your legal nakedness. I said covering the aura. Covering the legal nakedness. Okay, what is the aura of a man? Navel to the knee. Do the navel and the knee, are they included?
No.
Well, what is obligatory to cover from them? We mentioned they're not included, but not that it's recommended, that you have to cover a little bit of them.
Yeah.
Why? Because of the famous fiqh rule, مَا لَا يَتِمُ الْوَاجِبُ إِلَّا بِهِ فَهُوَ وَاجِبٌ. That which an obligatory action is not completed except by it, it is also obligatory. So you could never, you couldn't draw like a clear line of like where the knee starts and like the thigh ends, for example. Like you'd have to have a microscope. So in order for you to be able to fulfill this wajib, you have to cover a little bit of the knee, a little bit of the navel. Okay, what was the aura of the woman in prayer?
Everything except your face and hands.
Everything except for face and hands. And all sisters can also answer, by the way. If sisters want to answer, they're more than welcome to. Okay, we also mentioned La ilaha illallah. We also mentioned a point about removing impurity. Okay, we mentioned something that you can't have any impurity upon your clothes or your body or where you're going to pray. What do we mean by clothes? What do we mean by clothes here?
What you have on that has weight as well as what you're carrying.
Ahsant. What you have on, what you're wearing, as well as anything you're carrying. So that includes like carrying a baby. That includes something in your pocket, right? And we talked about last time about somebody carrying a baby. If they are certain that the baby has like a full diaper, for example, then carrying that baby would invalidate their prayer. Even touching the baby would invalidate their prayer. Okay. If they're not certain, like they might not. You know that you changed them, but they might not. Then the asl, the root or the baseline is that they are pure. The baseline is that they are pure, and you can go based off of that assumption, right? Or that asl really. Okay, and then there was a sister who had a question last time, and I believe I said that I needed to review it. I think it was something to do with removing najasa. Could you repeat your question? Okay, great. Okay, so that's a great question, and we'll talk about that right now. So what happens if you're trying to remove najasa and there's a stain left over? Let's say there's like for example, like blood, or like for parents, like their child's vomit or something like that. It happens, right? You wash it 3 times, you keep washing, you keep trying to pour water, it doesn't come out. Okay, there's a little bit of detail here. I would say it's not from the learning objectives, but somebody who wants to know this should write the details down. A person is required at minimum, when removing najasa, to wash it 3 times, each time including scrubbing, using some sort of cleaning solution, and then pouring water. So like, you scrub it, use cleaning solution, you pour water. That's time 1. Then time 2. Then time 3. At the end of those 3 times, okay, now let's take a look. Okay. We have to look at what is remaining from this stain. If that which is remaining is only a smell or only a color by themselves, not together, either only a smell remains or only a color remains, then that would be considered tahir. Okay, that would be considered tahir. You washed it you cleaned it 3 times with scrubbing and soap and water. At the end of those 3 times, you poured the water, the soap's gone, everything. We look at our end result. The end result is that there's only a color left over, tahir. Or there's no color and there's only a smell left over, tahir. It's pure, no problem. You're all set. However, if there's color and smell, or if there is taste only left over by itself, just taste left over, or color and smell, and min bab awla, like even more so obviously if there's color, smell, and taste, right? If there's color and smell together, or taste by itself, then it is not tahir. So, okay, well, what do? You keep trying until it gets to a point where it's impossible to remove. That the only way to remove the stain, like to remove these 2 attributes together, is by cutting it out, for example. Like you have a shirt, it has it, and I keep scrubbing, keep trying to clean it, and there's blood in it, for example. And every time I look, the spot is there and the smell is there. It smells like blood, blood looks like blood. I try. There's no way this is coming out without me cutting the cloth. At that point, it is excused. It is excused. And there's a very subtle difference between something being tahir, being pure, and something being excused. Being tahir means, khalas, like this is pure, you don't even have to try and clean it later. Right? This is totally pure. 10 years later, you're wearing the same shirt that has a little blood stain on it, and there's no smell to it, no problem. Okay? However, if we say that it is excused, that means that if in the future you're able to remove that stain, you must remove it. Right? If you're able to remove that stain, you must attempt to remove it. Okay? And they say, well, how do I know that the stain is not removable? You could ask an expert. Like you could go to like a laundromat, for example, and say, hey, like, is this possible to remove? They might tell you no, like you're stuck with this stain. Right? And again, this is if you have 2 awsaf, 2 characteristics of najasa, which is color and taste, or just color and smell, or just taste, which it's very hard to get to that point where like after you've washed it and you've cleaned it, whatever, there's still both color and taste left over. Right? Most of the time will be in the other category, which is something that is difficult to remove, but we've washed it 3 times, there's only one category left. There's only one characteristic left. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes.
So if you wash it the first time and the stain is completely removed, you still have to do it 3 times.
No. If the stain is totally removed, then that's fine. Right? That's totally fine. It's sunnah to wash it 3 times, and that's even without soap and scrubbing. Right? It's sunnah to do it 3 times, but if you can get the najasa out from the first time, then you're all set. I was mentioning 3 times specifically in the case where like it's not coming out that first time. Does the sister who initially asked the question, does that answer your question? Yeah, great. No problem.
Is the size of the najasa is important?
It is important when it comes to the uncle asked, he said, is the size of the najasa important? It is important when it comes to what are called ma'fuat, the excused, the category of excused najasa in prayer. There's a certain category of certain things that are excused with details, which maybe if we have time at the end of the lesson, we'll go into, because it's quite a long explanation. Yeah. And not all najasas are included in that. Not all najasa can be even considered for being excused. Some najasa, depending on the situation, it can be excused. Some najasa, no matter what, it is always it is always harmful to one's prayer, meaning it invalidates it. Okay, Bismillah. Today we're starting with furud as-salah, the integrals of prayer, and we want folks to know 3 things, 3 learning objectives. Number 1, we want folks to know the 17 obligatory integrals of prayer. Obligatory integrals, we're translating the word furud as obligatory integrals. And here furud means arkan, right? Means you could say even like pillars, right? That's what it's coming as the meaning of. we want folks to know the 17 obligatory integrals of prayer. Number 2, we want folks to know a valid intention for an obligatory prayer, that you have that memorized. Number 3, we want folks to know the conditions for these spoken integrals. Like certain integrals in Salah are spoken. There's something you speak, not something you physically do. We want folks to know what makes a valid spoken integral, like Fatiha, like Allahu Akbar, Takbiratul Ihram, etc. La ilaha illallah. And if my beloved brother Robert, if you could read the section, it's going to be starting from page 20, where he says the salats.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. The Salah, obligations of the Salah. These are intention, entering the prayer by saying Allahu Akbar, accompanied by the intention. The reading of the Fatiha, beginning with the words Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. The 14 points of stress, and not pronouncing
Here it means a dha instead of a dha.
okay, and not pronouncing a thaw instead of a law.
Mhm.
For no law sound in the there's no law sound in the Fatiha. And then bowing, and this is necessary to lean forward so as to be able to rest the hands on the knees. Then making the necessary pause so that all the limbs come to rest, and then returning to the upright position where pausing for a few moments is also necessary. Then prostration twice, and sitting between the two prostrations. Pausing is necessary in all of these. One must fulfill the above obligations in each rakah.
Continue.
The tashahhud.
The first tashahhud.
Oh, the first tashahhud and the sitting during this part of the salah is sunnah. The second tashahhud and sitting during it are compulsory. The prayer on the Prophet, upon him, his family, and companions be peace and salutations after the tashahhud, but before the salam is a compulsion, as it is the sending of salam. The minimum salam is assalamu alaikum.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wasalam. Okay, so the author Habib Ahmed bin Zayn al-Habashi, he says, may Allah be well pleased with him and benefit us from him and all of you. Ameen.
Ameen.
He says, Furudu salat and niyatu wa takbiratul ihram. Okay, so he starts with the pillars of prayer. Now, in the previous section, you'll notice that he said at the end of the previous section, we were talking about the preconditions of prayer. He included standing in the prayer as a precondition. However, in most of the books of the Shafi'is, they include the standing as part of the integrals of salah. So the first integral you're going to write down, there's 17. Okay, the first one you're going to write down is standing. Standing in an obligatory prayer for one who is able. Standing in an obligatory prayer for one who is able. That is your first condition. That is your first integral, excuse me. Okay. And most of these integrals are taken from the hadith in Bukhari narrated by Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu, that they call this hadith al-musi salatahu, the hadith of the one who performed his prayer not well, we could say, right? The man who he's praying in front of the Prophet ﷺ, finishes the prayer, goes to the Prophet ﷺ, and he gives salam, and the Prophet returns the salam, and the Prophet ﷺ tells him, "Irja' fasalli fa innaka lam tusalli." Right? Go back and pray, for you have not prayed. Right? That you didn't do it properly, and because you didn't do it properly, it's as if you did nothing at all. Right? And so then he does that 3 times. The man goes back, comes back. The Prophet tells him, goes back and pray. Does that 3 times, and then he finally says, Ya Rasulullah, ma uhsin illa hada. Allimni. Oh Prophet of God, oh Messenger of God, I do not know, I cannot do except for this. This is all I'm able to do. Teach me. Right? And this is what each and every single one of us should come to as a conclusion, that we should have the humility to be able to ask and to learn. Right? May Allah grant us that. Ameen. And the Prophet teaches him how to pray properly. And the Prophet ﷺ, he says, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray as you have seen me praying. Pray as you have seen me praying. And the standing of the prayer, the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and this is narrated in Bukhari, he says, صَلِّ قَائِمًا فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَقَاعِدًا فَإِن لَمْ تَسْتَطِعْ فَعَلَى جَنْبٍ. He says, pray standing, and if you're not able to, then sitting. And if you're not able to, then laying on your side. Okay, so standing is what? Is standing such that your back is straight, right? Such that your back is straight. Somebody who has like a natural curvature to their back, they can't stand up straight. That's okay. They're allowed to bend forward because of that, because of the way their back is, right? But standing is what? Is standing up with your back straight. When can a person sit? When can a person sit? A person can sit when standing would lead to great difficulty that is not normally bared, right? Or bore. Great difficulty that is not normally bared. And they say this difficulty is less than that which would make tayammum permissible, which we haven't taken that. That is like a general rule of thumb that comes in various different chapters of fiqh. They'll talk about in the bab of tayammum, the chapter of tayammum, when can you do tayammum? When you have water, but using water would cause harm. So they'll say, okay, if that harm is like this. So then in the rest of the abwab of fiqh, the chapters of fiqh, they'll say, okay, that is kind of their main standard. Is this difficulty, did it reach mubih tayammum, something that will allow you to make tayammum? So here he's saying, the author or the commentator on this book, he's saying that you can sit when you can when you face difficulty, a great difficulty, but not so much difficulty that it reaches mubih tayammum. Okay, so what does that mean for us practically? They give us an example. They say like somebody who, if they were praying on a boat and they were standing, they would experience vertigo. They would get dizzy, right? Then that person would be allowed to sit. Okay, or somebody, right? They have like a leg injury, and they're like, they're kind of it's causing a lot of pain. And another example, they say something that would completely take away your khushu'. Like you have absolutely no presence in prayer because you're just focused on that thing that's harming you. Right? You cannot focus in your prayer at all because that thing that's harming you is taking up all of your attention. That would be an example. There is some difference of opinion about that, but it's also a one of the two relied upon positions is that you could use that as a dhabit, right? As like a rule of thumb. Now, something important to understand is when it comes to sitting in prayer, there's a qa'ida fiqhiyya, a fiqhi rule of thumb, that they say al-maysur la yasqut bil-ma'sur. That which comes easy is not removed with that which comes difficult, which is difficult. So what does that mean? That means that, okay, let's say I need to sit for most of my prayer, but I can still stand when I say Allahu Akbar. Right? When I do the takbirat al-ihram, I can still stand. It's no problem. Like right in the beginning of my prayer, it's no problem. But like I know at some point my back is going to hurt me. Like I'm going to get some really intense shooting pains in my back. Okay, so I'll say Allahu Akbar, and then when I can't bear it, then I'll sit down. Or I can't stand in my prayer, but I can do ruku' standing up. Like I can't stand during the standing part, but I can do ruku'. Okay, I have to do ruku'. Or I can stand, but I can't do ruku'. Okay, then I have to stand and then I bend a little bit for ruku'. Or I stand and I can't do sujood. Okay, then I just sit down and bend a little bit for sujood, etc. Does that make sense? So something that you are able to do, you have to do it. It's not that, okay, like I'm a little bit sick, then okay, the whole prayer is just sitting. Right? And sometimes you'll see people with knowledge. You might see somebody in the masjid who's doing that. They'll have a chair, but they're not sitting on the chair the whole time, just standing up for the parts that they can't do. And then they say that if you can't stand, you sit. If you can't sit, you or actually, excuse me. One more thing about sitting. When you are sitting, how do you do ruku'? How do you do ruku'? You do ruku' such that you bend forward until your forehead passes your knees. So you bend forward until your forehead passes the line of your knees like this. Okay? How do you do sujood? Either you do a full sujood if you can, or if you can't, you do it by just leaning what? A little bit more. Like let's say my ruku', let's say, so here's my knees. Let's say my ruku' is like this. Okay? My forehead is ahead of my knees. Okay? My sujood will be here. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Now, if you can't sit, you lay on your side. And it can be either side, right? Like if, let's say you're in the hospital or something like that. It can be either side, right or left. However, right is better and left is makruh. Left is makruh. And you face the qibla with your body. You face the qibla with your body. If you can't lie on your side, you lie on your back. And you lift your head up a little bit and you face the qibla with your head, with your face. If you can't lift your head up, like you're laying flat on your back, you face the qibla with the bottoms of your feet. And in that case, you would indicate the ruku' and sujood through moving your head, like you would do like Allahu Akbar for ruku', Allahu Akbar, a little bit more for sujood, Allahu Akbar, like that. That's how you do sujood and ruku'. And if you can't do that, then you would indicate with your eyelids, with your eyes, right? You would indicate with you'd lay flat on your back, indicate with your eyes. And if you can't do that, you would imagine the pillars of the prayer in your hearts, right? They'll say like the spoken integrals, you would say them with your tongue, and the rest of the integrals, you would imagine yourself doing them in your heart, like in your mind. Okay, and they said if you can't even speak, like you're in a situation where like you're may Allah protect us from all this, you're imprisoned or you're prevented from speaking, such as there's like a muzzle or something, may Allah protect us all from that. So then even the speaking ones, you would imagine that in your mind. Prayer is one of those things that is always obligatory on a person. Right? As they say, as long as a person has their intellect, they must pray. As long as a person has their intellect, they must pray. And obviously this is not including, like for example, a woman on her menses or something like that. Right? As long as you have intellect and the Sharia has demanded from you to pray, you must pray. Any questions on standing? Okay. Number 2, the second one is intention. And in your book, it's the first one listed. And what I would like from the students is either maybe in your notebook to write these out one by one, or to what is the word? To write down to number. There we go. To number the pillars in the book. However, note that the first pillar that he's mentioning, or the first integral that he's mentioning, is intention. That would be number 2. Right? The first one really is qiyam, is standing up. The second one is intention. Intention. And niyyah. Right? Because every single act of worship, like we mentioned in wudu, every act of worship requires a niyyah. The Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ. Actions are only by their intentions. Okay, when do you make this niyyah? You make this niyyah while you are saying Allahu Akbar, during the opening takbir. As you are saying Allahu Akbar, you are calling to heart and mind your intention. Okay, your intention for an obligatory prayer needs 3 things. There are 3 parts of an intention for an obligatory prayer. Number 1 is the action that you're going to do. So you saying, I intend to pray. This first part, that is the first section of your niyyah. I intend to pray. Okay? Or nawaitu salah, or nawaitu an usalli, or usalli, right, in Arabic. Usalli yakfi. You can just say the word usalli. You don't have to say nawaitu in Arabic. In English, saying I pray, I don't know if that's proper English. So in English, it's better to say I intend to pray. I intend to pray. Then you have to mention the fact that what you're praying is obligatory. So you say, I intend to pray the obligatory dhuhr prayer. Okay, mentioning that is obligatory. Usalli fard al-dhuhr. That's what it is in Arabic. Usalli fard al-dhuhr, for example. I intend to pray the obligatory dhuhr prayer. And you could even say, I intend to pray the obligatory noon prayer. You could translate dhuhr, that's fine. Okay, and the third thing is at-ta'yin, that you specify what you're actually praying, which is what we said here at the end, dhuhr prayer or noon prayer. So you have the first part, I intend to pray, usalli. The second part, which is mentioning the obligatory nature of it, usalli fard, right? I intend to pray the obligatory. Then you mention what prayer you're praying, which is dhuhr, asr, whatever it might be. So usalli fard al-dhuhr. I intend to pray the obligatory dhuhr prayer. Usalli fard al-dhuhr. Okay, that is a valid intention for a fard prayer. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes.
Does it have to be spoken, or can it be in the heart?
So the intention In the Shafi'i school, it is recommended to say it. However, they say محلها القلب. Its place is in the heart. Right? Even let's say I say with my tongue before the Allahu Akbar. I say I intend to pray the obligatory Asr prayer. And I actually in my heart, I'm actually trying to pray Dhuhr. And when I say Allahu Akbar in my heart, I say I intend to pray the obligatory Dhuhr prayer. Which one is the consideration with the one that was in my heart? Does that make sense? So even if you don't say it's no problem, and even if you make a mistake in what you say is no problem. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then for a non-obligatory prayer, for a nafil, right, a supererogatory, an extra prayer, all you have to say is that you intend to pray and then what you intend to pray. You don't have to say sunnah, you don't have to say, you say, like for example, I intend to pray the sunnah before dhuhr. Usalli qabliyat al-dhuhr. I intend to pray the 2 rak'ahs before dhuhr. I intend to pray the sunnah after maghrib. Or I intend to pray the 2 rak'at after maghrib. I intend to pray 3 rak'at of witr. Does that make sense? Or usalli sunnat al-witr 3 rak'at. Right? Usalli sunnat al-witr 3 rak'at. Or rak'atain min al-witr. Usalli rak'atain min al-witr. You could say that too. I intend to pray, like if you're praying them separated, you would say, I intend to pray 2 rak'ahs from witr. Okay, because witr can be up to 11, so that's why you're specifying the 2. Something that that can't like be larger or smaller, you don't have to mention the rak'at. You don't have to mention the number of cycles. You could just say, I pray the 2 rak'at after dhuhr. Yes.
Can you change the intention during the prayer for a nafilah?
You cannot. You cannot. Yeah, not at least not in our school.
For witr, for example, instead of like at the same praying 3 rakat one shot, you can't change the intention.
After you start, you cannot. But there's details there. Let me review it. There's some details there. There are some exceptions, but as a general rule of thumb, you can't. Let me make a note for myself so I don't forget. Bismillah. View changing. Okay, any other questions? And a person shouldn't have waswasa. They shouldn't have like these like intrusive thoughts about their intention. Like, did I make intention? Did I not? Like, was that right or not? Right. A person should. The point is that a person understands what they're doing. Right. The purpose of intention is to separate tamyiz al-ada an al-ibadah. Right. To separate normal day-to-day actions from acts of worship. And it's also from the intention's purposes is to separate or to differentiate between different levels of ibadah. Right. If I'm going to come pray Fajr. Okay, I'm going to pray 2 rak'ahs. Am I praying the 2 rak'ahs before Fajr or I'm praying the 2 rak'ahs of Fajr? What differentiates between that? The intention, the niyyah, right? And it is not sufficient in the Shafi'i school to say, okay, like I'm going to pray Dhuhr later. In the Shafi'i school, that's called a azm, a resolve. You have a resolve to pray Dhuhr, which is great. It's fantastic. However, when you actually come to the prayer and you're saying Allahu Akbar, you have to call to heart. You have to call to heart and mind that intention. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, great. The third integral is, he mentions here in the text, he says, which is the second for him, entering the prayer by saying Allahu Akbar. Okay, this is called takbiratul ihram. Takbiratul ihram. Okay, and he mentions, he says takbiratul ihram ma'an niyyah, right, with the intention, like we mentioned before. So really, these first 3 integrals all happen at the same time. Like standing, your opening takbir, and your intention, all 3 of them happen at the same time, really. And the opening takbir, why is it called takbiratul ihram? Because it is what makes things that were normally halal haram. It's called takbiratul ihram because it's what makes what was normally halal haram. For example, normally it's halal for me to eat. You say Allahu Akbar, it's not halal anymore, right? It's halal for me to speak normally. You say Allahu Akbar, it's not halal for you to speak anymore, right? Etc. And it must be done while standing. So a mistake that sometimes happens is somebody will join the prayer late, and let's say the imam is in sujood. So what does the person do? They join the prayer late, they say Allahu Akbar, and they join like that, right? So did they actually say Allahu Akbar in the prayer? No, they did not. They didn't actually, or excuse me, while standing, they did not. They said Allah, they started it while standing, and then they finished it in sujood. That is a mistake. Their salah, in our school, their salah didn't even start. They did not even start praying. Right? I'm not aware of another school that would carry that person. Right? So a person, while they're standing, they say Allahu Akbar, and then Allahu Akbar, second time to go down into sujood. Does that make sense to everybody? Very, very important. And if you're following an imam, when do you start your Allahu Akbar? After the imam says the ra of Allahu Akbar. So the imam says Allahu Akbar, you hear that ra, then you say Allahu Akbar. Okay, the fourth is reciting Fatiha. Reciting Fatiha. And the author, may Allah be well pleased with him, he says, وقراءة الفاتحة بالبسملة والتشديدات الأربع عشرة وإخراج والتشديدات I think it should be فتحة والتشديدات الأربع عشرة وإخراج الضاد من الضاء وليس في الفاتحة ضاء. Okay, so he mentions that you have to recite the Fatiha, and then he mentions in his text some of the conditions of the Fatiha, right? And he mentions that Basmala is part of the Fatiha in the Shafi'i school. And actually in the Shafi'i school, the Basmala of every surah is an ayah of the surah. The Basmala of every surah, that's why if you're praying behind a Shafi'i imam, you'll hear them say like after Fatiha, you hear them say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Qul huwa Allahu ahad. You'll hear them say the Basmala for other surah as well, except for Surah At-Tawbah. So reciting the Fatiha, and it must be said in every rak'ah. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, لا صلاة لمن لم يقرأ بفاتحة الكتاب. There is no prayer for one who does not recite the opening of the book, meaning Surah Al-Fatiha. And even if someone's praying in congregation, you have to say the Fatiha. When do you say it? After the Imam says his Fatiha. So Imam says his Fatiha, وَلَضَّالِينَ Ameen, and you begin quietly to yourself saying the Fatiha. Okay? La ilaha Rasulullah. Now, the Fatiha in every spoken interval, and there are 5, right? Takbiratul Ihram, Fatiha, Tashahhud, Al-Akhir, the last Tashahhud, the prayer, Salah ala Nabi, and Salam. Every single spoken integral must be said in Arabic, and it must be said loud enough such that if you were in a quiet room, you would hear yourself. Loud enough such that you would be in a quiet room. If you were in a quiet room, you'd hear yourself. So let's say you're praying in like a building where there's like AC going on and it's very loud and whatever, and you're saying the Fatiha and you can't actually hear yourself. That's fine if you believe that, okay, if that AC wasn't going on right in my ear, I'd be able to hear this Fatiha. Okay, so it has to be that loud. And in the Shafi'i school, every dhikr you do is only counted and rewarded for if you say it out loud like that. Right? Like even like other adhkar, other things, it must be said out loud such that you're able to hear yourself. Right? And a point is that a person should not say it so loud such that they're disturbing the people around them. Right? So you might say, can any of you hear me? Can anybody hear me? I can hear myself. Right? That's how it should be. Such that others can't hear you, but you can hear yourself. Okay? Now, if others could hear you, it doesn't invalidate it, and it's not haram, but it's makruh. It's makruh in a congregational prayer. And if the other person, they lose focus of their prayer, right? They get, إذا أدى إلى التشويش, if they lose focus in their prayer, then it could be haram. It could potentially be haram if you're too loud. And sometimes that'll happen. There's one student. I would always pray in the same spot on the right side of the masjid in the front row. And there was a student next to me, Somali brother. And every single day he would recite Fatiha the same way and very loud. And every time he would recite, I would lose my train of thought. And so one time I tried to go like further away from him, and like from 4 or 5 guys down, I'm hearing this guy recite Fatiha. Right? MashaAllah, bless him. He was a very special person and a great student. He just recited Fatiha very loud. Na'am. And also about this point about it being Arabic, somebody who's like a new Muslim or their Arabic is not great, they can learn it through transliteration. And holding a card is fine. Like particularly for a new Muslim, they can hold a card in the prayer and read off of it. That's fine. Or somebody who can read Arabic and they need to hold a card to read off it, that's totally fine. No problem in our school. Even somebody who wants to read with the Mus'haf carrying it, no problem in our school. And it must be with its tashdidat. So Alhamdulillah, Rabbil Alameen. Right? Rabbi. Rabbi. That ba has a shadda. Right? You can't say Rabbil Alameen. Right? Iyaka na'budu. Not Iyaka na'budu. With no shadda. And how does a person make sure they do that? By sitting with a teacher, right? Every single person should humble themselves and sit with a tajweed teacher and have them, correct their tajweed to make sure they're reciting their Fatiha properly, right? It can't have mistakes that change the meaning, right? You can't say like iyaki, for example. You can't say an'amtu, right? That would change the meaning, and it can't have a mispronunciation, or a letter that is flipped. Right, you can't flip a letter, and he mentioned this. He says that وإخراج الضاء. How does he say it? إخراج الضاد من الضاء. Right, you don't say ولا الضالين. Say ولا الضالين. Right, he says وليس في الفاتحة ضاء. Okay. Any questions about Fatiha? Zain. Okay. Now, the next, let me open up the English. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Okay, number 5 is ruku', the bowing. Okay, number 5 is ruku', the bowing. And what is a valid ruku'? He mentions this. He says, may Allah be well pleased with him. He says, وَيَجِبُ أَنْ يَنْحَنِيَ بِحَيْث تَنَالُ رَاحَتَاهُ رُكْبَتَيْهِ وَيَطْمَئِنَّ فِيهِ وُجُوبًا حَتَّى تَسْكُنَ أَعْضَاؤُهُ. Okay, so he says that ruku', such that the palms of one hand reach their knees. So the minimum ruku' is such that the palms of my hands reach my knees. So Allahu Akbar. Okay, right here, yeah. That would be the minimum ruku', such that the palm of my hands reach my knee. That's the minimum. Now, obviously, the maximum would be for someone to straighten out their back. Okay, that is the minimum and maximum ruku'. The minimum is that the palms of the hands reach the knees, even if your palms aren't touching the knees. So, like, let's say, Allahu Akbar. Okay, I'm here. Let's say, like, my hands are over here. Okay. Can my palms reach my knees? Yes. Okay, then that is a valid ruku'. Even if my hands aren't actually touching my knees, though they should. Sunnah. Does that make sense to everybody? Zain.
Somebody is holding it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Like somebody's holding a kid. All you have to do is bend forward such that your palms, if your hands were free, your palms would touch your knees. If they can't bend over because they're holding the kid, that would be a problem. The kid wouldn't be a valid excuse. They would have to put the kid down. And that must be in ruku', that must be with what is called tama'nina, which is a stillness or a pause. That must be with stillness. So you can't go into ruku' like this. You can't go up quickly like that. You have to actually come down to your ruku' such that you pause for a moment. That your movement has some kind, between you going down and going back up, there's a pause. What is the minimum length of time for that pause? You saying subhanallah. Like go down, subhanallah, that's enough. Okay. Yes, yeah, going down, subhanallah, that's enough. However, obviously a person should say the masnoon dhikr, subhanallah bil azim wa bihamdih 3 times. Right, that's what you should say 3 times. However, what is the minimum? Subhanallah. Okay. We have a question online that I didn't answer. Is there a separate intention for make-up prayers? Yes, you would say nawaitu qada al-dhuhr. I intend a make-up dhuhr, for example. I intend a make-up dhuhr. Yeah. Okay, now this concept, tama'nina, stillness in the prayer, and that is number 6. It's the next bullet point down. Did I say 6? Yes. Yeah, it's 6. That is number 6 from the obligatory integrals. They'll say, it says in the English here, then making the necessary pause, tama'nina, so that all the limbs come to a rest. Okay, that is number 6. Now, number 7 and 8, they're in the same bullet point in the English, number 7 is i'tidal, that a person straightens up their back from the ruku'. And they straighten their back similar to what we mentioned in the standing in prayer, that their back is straight if they're able to. And similarly, there must be tama'nina, there must be stillness. The minimum is subhanallah. And obviously the best is for a person to say the various adhkar that are sunnah. Those are 7 and 8. 7 is i'tidal, straightening up, and 8 is tama'nina. 8 is tama'nina. A tama'nina is the stillness. The stillness, like that pause.
If you say i'tidal was,
I'tidal is straightening the back after ruku'. Right, so here's ruku', which is number 5. In the ruku' I have tama'nina, I have stillness, number 6. I'tidal, number 7. Right, and then the tama'nina, the stillness in i'tidal, that's number 8. Did you have a question? Oh, okay. Is that clear for everybody? Okay. Number 9 is the 2 sujuds. The 2 sujuds. And then 10 is tama'nina or stillness in the 2 sujuds. Okay, so number 9 is 2 sujuds, 10 is tama'nina in them. Okay. Now, the 2 sujud, or the sujud, what makes a valid sujud? A valid sujud must be on, as the Prophet ﷺ said, like 7, he said in the hadith, 7 bones. He says, Umirtu an asjuda ala sab'ati a'zum. I was commanded to do sujud on 7 bones. He says, ala al-jabha, on the forehead. Forehead, the 2 hands, 2 knees, 2 feet. Forehead, 2 hands, 2 knees, 2 feet. Okay, and it's sunnah for the nose to also touch. Now, the hands, you even like 1 finger is fine. Even 1 finger is fine. Or like you could do like this. You could do like this, right? It's sunnah to do like this. However, even on 1 finger is fine. Like let's say, I don't know, you're somewhere, you're praying over somewhere that's kind of like dirty, messy, whatever it might be. For the feet, it is with your toes, right? That with your toes, with the bottom of your toes. Okay. Now there is a position in the school that is strong, that is not the relied upon, but it is strong, that only the forehead is required. And I'm mentioning this why? Because sometimes you're in a situation where like you can't put your feet down, for example, or you can't put your arms down, right, properly. You can follow that position, right? If there's some kind of need where you can't put your knees, you can't properly do sujood except for your forehead, you can take that position. That's fine. It's fine. Now, the forehead, though, it can be even part of the forehead, not the whole thing. It can even be part of it. So one thing that people should be careful of is having a kufi that does this. That completely blocks off my forehead, right? It should be some of the forehead, and it should be the skin of the forehead itself. Okay? Not like if somebody, again, like if somebody has a kufi and they're praying over the kufi, that would not suffice them. It has to be the skin of the forehead itself. And it must be with the forehead resting on the ground. So they give an example. They say like if there was something made of like there's some cotton here, that the cotton would be pressed. When you put your forehead down on it, you would press it down. So like let's say for example you're praying, you're camping and you're praying on the grass, and the grass is prickly. You don't want to get your forehead on it, right? So you kind of go like this. You kind of just barely touch it. That would not suffice. You have to make sujood such that like your forehead is resting on the ground. Does that make sense? Yes.
is this the same for men and women? What if a woman has like hijab covering or a niqab?
Same for men and women. Same for men as women, right? Like what can a woman who is wearing niqab do is she can lift it up just a little bit, right? Because it's any portion of the forehead touching. But she would, yeah. And it's better for a woman if she's praying alone to have her face uncovered while praying. Anyways, if she's praying alone, yeah, yes. Oh, sorry, I thought you had a question. Any questions about sujood?
That was number 9.
That was 9 and 10. 10 being the tama'nina, the stillness in it, right? So the minimum sujood is what? Is that bi qadr subhanallah, that the amount of time it takes you to say subhanallah. Okay, and obviously the sunnah adhkar are better, and a person should not leave them. Okay, number 11 and 12 is sitting between the two sujuds and tama'nina, stillness in them. Okay, sitting in between. You can't go from sujood like this. You can't go Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. You know, it has to be Allahu Akbar, pause, Allahu Akbar. Number 13 and 14 is the final tashahhud and sitting in it. The final tashahhud and sitting in the final tashahhud. So what does the author say here? He says, well, he says initially, وَالتَّشَهُدُ الْأَوَّلِ وَقُعُودُهُ سُنَّةٌ. The first tashahhud, meaning that if you're praying a prayer like that has two tashahhuds in it, the first one is sunnah. Right? The first one is sunnah, the one that you do after 2 rak'ahs. The first one is sunnah. Right? Sunnah mu'akkada, it's an emphasized sunnah. And if you miss it, you would do sujood sahu. But if you miss it, it does not. If you miss it, and even if you didn't do sujood sahu, your prayer would not be invalidated. The rukn, the obligatory integral, is what? Is the second one, or the final one, you could say, the final tashahhud. And sitting it, yeah. So we said 13 and 14. 13 is the final tashahhud, and 14 is sitting in the final tashahhud. And the author shortly, he's going to tell us what is the minimum, like form, verbal form that is mujzi, that is sufficient. That is sufficient. Na'am. And similarly, it must be in Arabic. It must be out loud. Transliteration is fine. If somebody cannot read the Arabic at all, like a new Muslim, they could translate it. The Fatiha, they cannot. Fatiha cannot be translated in prayer, but the tashahhud can be. The tashahhud can be. And yeah, no. Okay, number 15 is the salah on the Prophet ﷺ after the tashahhud. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That's the minimum applicable. Okay, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And obviously, as-salah al-Ibrahimiyya is better, right? Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad kama sallaita ala Sayyidina Ibrahim wa ala ali Sayyidina Ibrahim until the end of it. That is the best formula of salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And similarly, this is a spoken integral. So all of the conditions of a spoken integral apply here. Number 16 is the salam. The salam. And that is how you leave the prayer. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, Miftahu salah at-tuhur. The key to prayer is purification. وَتَحْرِيمُهَا التَّكْبِيرِ. And that which enters you into the prayer, meaning what makes things haram for you, like speaking and eating and walking, etc., what enters you into it is takbir, saying Allahu Akbar. وَتَحْلِيلُهَا التَّسْلِيم. And leaving it, or that which makes those things halal for you again, is at-taslim, saying Assalamu alaikum. So when do you actually leave the prayer? Is when you say the meme of Assalamu alaikum. Okay, now I'm out of my prayer. So like we mentioned last class, somebody who says Assalamu alaikum, when did I say the meme? After I turned my chest from the qibla. Salah is invalidated. Right? Why? Because from the conditions of the prayer is for my chest to face the qibla. And when I turned my chest away, I was still in the prayer. Right? So somebody who wants to be extra with their salam, and it's not sunnah to do that. It's not sunnah to turn your chest for salam even after the salam. But somebody who wants to be extra with their salam, they'll say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. They really want to turn their chest like that, which they shouldn't. It's not even sunnah, but if that would carry them. Now in the actually before we mention that, any questions on what preceded?
Sometimes you make salam. You saw something very interesting. Immediately don't make salam on the other side. So I was trying to correct that situation. So I was just wondering if it is valid to look at others still you are not you have not concluded your prayer.
What is the sunnah way of doing salam? So a person should be looking down, and they should turn such that their cheek is visible to those behind them. So like you can. However, in the Shafi'i school, they'll say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah or wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Like that.
Before you finish the second side, you still are looking at something else.
before you finish the second side, you're still looking at something else. What do you mean?
Saw something interesting over there, and you're not finishing your prayer. You started looking at that.
Oh, you're saying that like you're sitting here distracted, like you stop for a while.
Lots of start and you started.
Yeah, I mean you're out of the prayer. You are out of the prayer. The first Assalamu alaikum takes you out of the prayer. The second one is sunnah. Yeah. Yes.
Is that as soon as you begin with the word salam, or is it
When you end, when you say when the meme Assalamu alaikum, okay, now I'm out of the prayer. The rest after that is all sunnah. Any other questions about what has preceded? Okay, so then the author, he mentions, he says, what is the minimum tashahhud? أقل التشهد الواجب, the minimum obligatory tashahhud, the minimum tashahhud that will suffice for you. And if a person can do the maximum, that's even better. And maybe we can, I'm not sure how, maybe we can send a little picture of the maximum in the Shafi'i school. It's going to be a little bit different than maybe what some of us memorized as kids. But all of it is based off of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, as well as the Salat Ibrahimiyya. Right? There's various different narrations about how the Prophet said it, and the way the Shafi'is combine between those is by making one form that encompasses all of those. Right? But that's sunnah. That's sunnah. So he says the minimum here is at-tahiyyatu lillahi, salamun alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salamun alayna wa ala ibadillahi as-salihin. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Okay, that is the minimum at-tahiyyat. It's here, like in my copy, it's 2 lines. It's 2 lines. The English transliteration is 3 lines. Right? It's not too challenging. And what does that translate to? That translates to at-tahiyyatu lillah, meaning all greetings are for God. Then it's salah on the Prophet ﷺ, and prayer of peace upon you, O Prophet, and likewise the mercy and blessings of God. Peace be upon us and on the righteous servants of God. And when a person says this, when you say Assalamu alayna wa ala ibadillah as-salihin, right? Sending peace upon us and all of the righteous servants of God, a person should call to heart, sending salam to all of the angels and all the pious predecessors. Right? A person should give call to heart, giving salam to all of the angels, all of those who worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salamu alayna wa ala ibadillah as-salihin. And then you say shahada, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. That is the minimum sufficient tashahhud. And because it is a spoken integral, all of the different things that we mentioned about spoken integrals and the conditions apply here. Okay, and then he says, وَأَقَلُّ الصَّلَاةِ عَلَى النَّبِي, the minimum salah on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Okay, and it has to be with Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, not Allahumma salli alayh. Right? Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That is the minimum. La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. Naam. And it comes in athar, it comes in some of the narrations that the tashahhud is taken, the Prophet ﷺ, it's what he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when he was greeted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? At-tahiyyatu lillah, right, which is a greeting, right? It's what he said to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Isra, in when he ascended to the 7 heavens. When he spoke to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is what he said. This is how he greeted Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, any questions? And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also greeted him. Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And an interesting point that they make, so this kaf here, when you say Assalamu alayka, this kaf here is kaf al-khitab, the kaf of speaking to somebody. And if you said Assalamu alayka to anybody else, like if somebody walked in the masjid and I'm praying and I said Assalamu alayka, my salah is batil. My salah is broken. Why? Because I spoke in my prayer and I spoke to somebody, right? And the affair of prayer is that you don't speak to creation in prayer. You speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, the only being in creation that it's permissible for you to use kaf al-khitab with in your prayer is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The only being in creation that you can say Assalamu alayka, peace be upon you, is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You might say, oh, okay, well, we're really far from him anyways. Like we're not even next to his grave. though as it comes in Sahih Hadith, the angels take our salam and deliver it to the Prophet ﷺ. But let's say, okay, even that, the Sahaba, when the Prophet ﷺ was alive, they're praying right behind him, they're saying, Assalamu alayka ayyuhan nabi wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Right? They're praying right behind him. He's 5 feet in front of them, you know, 1.5 meters in front of them, and they're saying, Assalamu alayka to you. Right? And that just shows the station of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Any questions from today's lesson? Yes. Oh, excuse me, I didn't mention 17. Thank you. 17 is tartib, order. 17 is doing all of this in order. Okay, now what happens if you miss a rukun, an integral of the prayer? So like, okay, I'm standing. Instead of going down into ruku', I go down into sujood by accident. Okay, what do? They say, okay, there's 2 situations. The first situation is you remember that you forgot to do ruku' before you get to the next ruku'. Okay, like before you missed the ruku' in the first rak'ah. Before you get to the ruku' in the second rak'ah, you remembered, oh shoot, I didn't do ruku'. Immediately you go back to the first ruku'. You go back, you go all the way back to standing, and then you say Allahu Akbar, you go to ruku'. Does that make sense to everybody? Immediately. And it can't be like, let's say I'm in sujood, I don't stand up and go right here. Like I don't go from sujood to ruku' like this. I go all the way standing up and then I go into ruku'. Does that make sense to everybody? And then what happens if, let's say you get to the second rak'ah and you're in the ruku' of the second rak'ah? You just continue from that point and everything in between is not considered, is not counted. So like you're in the second rak'ah, you enter ruku', okay, now this is actually me continuing from my first rak'ah that I forgot the ruku' in. Does that make sense to everybody? So I'm going through my prayer. I'm here from my first rak'ah. Instead of ruku', I go down into sujood. Sujood, I sit, sujood again, I stand up again, I get into ruku', I'm in my second rak'ah now, I'm like, oh wait, I didn't do ruku' in my first rak'ah. Now it's as if I'm back in my first rak'ah again, just continuing from this point. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. La ilaha illallah. And those are the 17 integrals of prayer. Now, some of the Shafi'i books, this is just a little fun fact, some of the Shafi'i books, they have them listed as 13. Why? Because the tama'nina that we mentioned, the stillness, they consider that like a characteristic of those different parts of prayer. They don't consider it to be its own integral, right? And really the meaning and what is sought out is the same. And I chose to list them out as 17 here just to emphasize the point about the tama'nina, because it might be something that people, especially like young people or kids, might forget when they're in a hurry praying. Any questions? Okay, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of you and reward all of you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward the author, Habib Ahmed bin Zayn al-Habashi, and enter him and all of us into the highest levels of Jannah with the prophets and the martyrs and the righteous. All of that in khair, lutf, afiyah, wa ila hadz nabi, Allahumma salli wa sallam barak. Al-Fatiha. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Sirat al-Ladin.